Somewhere around 15 months after living in Thailand, I got blindsided. One night around 3 in the morning, I was asleep next to the girl that I was seeing at the time when my phone rang. And it was the guy who had bought my print business many months before. And he started off with a little, light small talk. But I knew something was up, so I said, hey, what's going on? Tell me what's happening. How you doing? And he said, I can't keep paying you. To which I responded, what do you mean you can't keep paying me? You have to keep paying me. He said, I just don't have the money. I'm not earning as much as I thought I would. So we went back and forth a little bit. I was a bit pissed, but, I had to keep my calm because I knew it wasn't going to get me anywhere just to yell and scream at him. So I said to him, listen, you just paid me. It was like 2 days before he had paid me. I said, I need you to pay me again. He said, okay. Took him a couple seconds, but he said, okay. So I got one more month of income, and that bought me a little bit of time. And I had about $2,500 still stashed. And so what I did was I paid as many bills as I could. That was 3 to 4 months worth of bills. Like my rent. I put money away for my electric, and I had maybe $1,000. I think it was $1,000 left. But I realized I didn't have a job. I didn't have any money coming in, so I had no leverage. And I thought about flying back, and honestly, I thought about flying back and breaking his legs and collecting my money. But that wasn't going to happen. I knew that wasn't the answer. I don't have that kind of clout. And I thought about taking him to court, and I thought, well, by the time I get to court, by the time I get to see him, it's going to be years before we actually get this taken care of. And I'm not going to be able to live in Thailand. So I thought, what can I do? I'm on my own. I have to do something. And so, I was with this girl, and she was very supportive, and she had some money, and she was, like, oh, don't worry about it. And, I'm like, yeah, okay, but you're going to worry about it. And eventually, she gave me the speech. She said, when you get back on your feet and when maybe you have a house and you have a kitchen, something like that, then maybe we can get back together. And I was kind of bummed, but I knew it was going to happen. And that moment told me everything I needed to know because, we weren't going to get back together, although we did reconnect a couple years later briefly. We didn't get back together like, oh, we're going to be together forever or anything like that. So I learned the hard way, once someone leaves you once for something like this, they'll probably do it again. So one day I went to Woodstock Pub in Nana. I was living on between Soi 1 and Soi 3. I had a nice place there. Actually, no, I was living on Soi 1 at the time. And so, it was just a quick walk. I mean, it took 10 minutes to walk down to Nana. And I went in and, by myself, I went in and ordered a beer. And, one beer became two became three. And I met this guy. I'd seen this guy around, and I had talked to him before. His name was Les. Still remember the guy, vaguely. But, we sat down together and talked, and he found out that I didn't have a job, and he said, oh, well, go down to Inlingua at Central Chitlom. They'll hire you right away. And I was like, what? Really? I go, well, I don't know. I can't. I've never taught before. And he goes, just go. And, that was like a little sliver of hope for me. So the next day, I cleaned myself up. I got my best duds on. I dressed the part, and I headed down there. And I asked to speak to the manager. His name was John. I still remember that. And he gave me a quick tour. Like, immediately, he goes, oh, let me show you around here. And, he was kind of a ruddy-faced Brit. And it seemed to me he was a bit of a drunk. But he wasn't drunk then. And so we just stopped. And he said, listen, why should I hire you? And I said, well, because I'll show up on time. I'll do my best, and I won't come in drunk. And he laughed, And I got the job. And I started the next day. So it was real, I thought, oh my God, I got a job. I'm so happy. Yeah. I was thrilled to have a job because I knew it meant I could stay and I had money. And I was like, oh, I don't want to go back. So I stuck with it for about 4 months, and I did not like it at all. Because a lot of times I was dealing with little kids. I got the, little 5-year-old, and little 8-year-olds, that kind of thing. And it seemed like every day there were a couple of kids that were raising their hand. Teacher, teacher! And then they would be like, I got to go to the bathroom, put key. And, I got to go pee-pee. Oh, I got to go. And they're like holding themselves. And I was like, oh my God, just go. It's okay, go. And they didn't really want to learn. Maybe that was me. I needed to try to get them to want to learn. But I was winging it every day and just kind of learning as I went. And I just remember 2 things. I remember my best student was a Taiwanese girl, and I loved trying to teach her because she was so smart. And then my favorite student was a gorgeous Thai young lady. She was a saleswoman, a jewelry saleswoman, and she wanted to know all about me. She did not really, she wanted to know about me, and that's how she learned her English. And so I eventually went out with her. A couple months in, I went out with her. And that was fun. That was nice. But she never learned really anything. She was kind of worthless as a student. But eventually I got a phone call from a buddy of mine, somebody that I knew in Bangkok, and I had helped along a while back. Actually, I had been doing some stuff with eBay, just testing it out. And then I told him about it. He got started in it. And then we were both making a little bit of money from it. And he kind of was, grateful. And so one day I get a call from him, and he says, listen, I got something I want to deal with. I want you to come down and help me out. I said, well, where are you now? I'm in Phuket. I said, well, I got a job. And he said, no. He said, listen, I'll hire you. I said, okay. Great. 30,000 baht, and he gave me a free room that he paid, all the utilities for and everything like that. So I quit my teaching job. I put a little notice, and I said, listen, I'll give you a couple of days notice, and that was it. And then I packed up and moved to Phuket. And what it was he had bought a print shop. Since I had experience in printing, he thought, okay, you can help me out. I said, okay, that's fine, great, and as soon as I get in, I look at this print shop, and I just went, this place is in terrible shape. When you get a printing machine, really, you have rollers on the machine. Those rollers are supposed to be pit-free, they're supposed to be round. These were like oval, and they had pits all throughout them, which means that the ink will not stick where the pits are, right? So you have to constantly tap that spot to keep the ink on it so that it will keep pressing the ink on the paper everywhere that it's supposed to go. And, it was just in horrible shape. So, I always had to smear the ink on the rollers and all this other kind of stuff. And he would go, oh, if you got to use a rubber band on it, go ahead and do it. And I'd be like, all right, whatever. But I'm just thinking to myself, if I can't do it, I can't do it, And so, I had a lot of time. He wouldn't even come in until 11 or 12 o'clock. And so from 8 o'clock until then, I was basically, maybe I would run one job, and I'd get that done quick, and then I'd just sit there. And so what I started doing was figuring out how much money do we need to make in this place, because he had a partner who I also knew. I knew both of them. And I've tried to figure out how much money we needed. And, it was, I don't know how much it was. It might have been 200,000 or something like that, because he wasn't paying much for rent or anything like that. But after a little while, I kind of knew. I was like, he's not making any money here. This is kind of, It's not going to work. And so one day he came to me and he goes, we're shutting it down. I went, well, I kind of expected that. So I had the apartment until the end of the month. I stayed there until the end of the month, and then I flew back to Bangkok, and I had 5 nights in a hotel, and I was trying to figure out my next move. I didn't know what I was going to do. I had to buy a ticket back to the United States. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I started looking on the internet, and I found that the best place to live and work at the time was supposedly Seattle, Washington. I don't know. I wouldn't want to live there now. But that's where I went. I bought a ticket. I went there. And immediately, almost immediately, I got a job. Okay? I got a job working in a factory that was basically it was a huge print shop. They did all kinds of things. They did carbonless forms. They did all kinds of things. But I was the paper cutter, because I had cut paper before. So in order to cut paper, you basically have to know some basic math. You need to have, some decent math skills. And you're just cutting all day long. And, you make sure you keep your fingers out of the way of the blade. You don't get your fingers cut off. And this job paid me $15 an hour. Now, I had also found a room staying with this couple, and I paid like $200 a month or whatever it was. I only paid 1 month, okay? And then after about a month, they came to me at the company and they said, listen, this is a temporary job and we're out of work. We don't need you anymore. But I'll tell you what, if you want a job, we can give you a full-time job in Portland, Oregon. And I just thought to myself, Portland, Oregon? And I was like, no, I don't want to work. I don't want to live in Portland, Oregon. I just, honestly, I don't know what I want. I know it's beautiful, but I just thought to myself, there is no way I want to live in Portland, Oregon. And so I said no. I turned it down. And then I went, and I was still staying at this place, and I told them, listen, I got to move out. Because I had to figure something out. I have to figure out where else am I going to go work? What can I do? But I knew somebody at the hostel, and he said to me, listen, you come tomorrow. We'll meet up. And then the way it'll work is I may have a job for you, and if I do, you'll be able to get in really easy. And I was like, praying. I'm like, okay. So I go and meet him, and I didn't know it, but this guy was like, he was major druggie. But what he did was, all his life, he went out and worked on fishing boats. And they didn't care because he was sober most of the time while he was working. And so he gave me a phone number. I called him up, and they said, yeah, come on in. We'd like you to apply. I go in, like within an hour, I'm there. And I'm showing them, okay, I got this, I got that. Here's my paperwork. I'm filling everything out. Okay. Looks good. And they said, do you want to work for us? And I said, yeah, that's why I'm here. So they said, okay, you come with us. Come upstairs. We have a medical area upstairs where we can check you out. I said, okay. They did like an x-ray. They checked me. They checked to see how I could bend, how I could stretch, if I could stretch up, bending back and forth, moving to and fro, and I passed. And, I was still in decent shape, and I was fairly young then. And they said, what we want you to do is tomorrow morning, you come here at 7 a.m. in the morning, and from there, we're going to take you to the airport. We're going to fly you to Anchorage. From there, you're going to fly to another place, which I don't remember the name of that place. Maybe it was King Cove. And then from there, what they did was they said, you just wait here for a few minutes. And me and like 3 other guys, we jumped in to a helicopter. And they flew us out to this boat that was about a half an hour, 45 minutes away. We get dropped off on the boat, right, on the top of the boat. We go downstairs, and they bring us to see the captain. He, how's it going, guys? How you doing? Your trip all right? All that kind of stuff. And so then he said to me, hey, so when do you want to start working? I said, right now. Because I'm thinking to myself, the sooner I start working, the sooner I start making some cash. because I need money. And so he said, okay, that's what I like to hear. So I start working. So for the next 3 months, I did all sorts of jobs. I was a fish processor. What was it? You know, I sanded off the guts of crab. I handled the frozen fish. I offloaded. What else did I do? Eventually I became an assistant deckhand, but that was for another reason, which I'll get into in a couple of minutes. But, you know, I had met this girl from Udon Thani, and we were kind of, you know, we were an item, I guess. And I said to her, listen, I need a few things. So she says, okay, what do you need? I tell her, I wanted a couple clothes, and I could buy some clothes on the boat, but they were more expensive. So I got a couple of clothes from her, it was really, you know, inexpensive stuff. And I said, but I need some medicine. So she goes and gets me a bunch of Tylenol 4s. Tylenol 4s are Tylenol with codeine. I think they got 40 milligrams of codeine in them. And on the ship, these were like gold. Because I think at that time I was buying them for like $1 each or something, $2 each, whatever it was. And I had like 600 of them, 500 of them, 600 of them. And I started selling them at like $5 each. To me, I was like, well, you know, I guess I'll do this. I met and I got to know the deckhand and his girlfriend. They lived together in the same room, in the same bunk. And they liked these. So I started giving them some all the time. Every day they got a couple, you know, just for being in charge. And they would, in exchange, they would give me some light duty. Oh, why don't you go get some coffee? And I'd go, you know, sit in a room for 20 minutes drinking coffee and, you know, standing around acting like I'm getting ready to go to work. Oh, yeah, let me see here. Oh yeah, I got to go over there. Okay. You know, whatever I could do to get out of it. And that was nice, but I earned some money, which was great. And then when I got off of the boat, by the time I got off of the boat, I had about 15 grand. And I bought a ticket to Thailand, business class ticket to Thailand. And I thought, you know, I'm going back, man. That's it. I went up to Udon Thani. The girl had said I could stay with her. So, of course, I do. And, of course, I paid the bills while I was there. But while I was on the ship, I had met a young guy. We almost came to blows for some reason. I don't even remember why. It was some stupid reason. But after, you know, we calmed down, and it was like, you know, the deal was if you got into a fight on the boat, you're automatically kicked off the boat, and you have to pay your own way back, which that sucks, obviously. So I was like, well, I don't want to do that. So then we started talking, and it turned out he knew about the internet, he knew about websites, and he knew about Microsoft Front Page. And he told me about that, and I was like, I don't know anything about that. I go, I'd get somebody to do it for me. I'll have to pay them money. He goes, no. He goes, do it yourself. Figure it out. Take a little bit of time. He said, in a month you can figure out how to do, you know, pretty much everything. And I was like, okay. So when I went back to Thailand, I started thinking about this, and I thought, how am I going to do this? I had no computer. So what I did was I drove into town in Udon Thani, and I found an internet cafe, and I decided to use this one particular computer. And after a couple of days there, the guy goes, listen, if you want, just come in here. This is your computer. You can use this computer. I said, okay. So after a couple of weeks, I started figuring it all out, and I started making a website. And it started coming along. And I sold a few things on eBay. And I was like, wow, this is all right, you know. I can make some money at this. I was like, wow. So after about 5 months, you know, the site was almost done. I just had a few things I needed to kind of work out. And I thought to myself, you know, I got money, but I need more money. And I thought, I'm going to go back one more time. I really didn't want to because, listen, the work sucks. I mean, that's just the way that it is. It sucks, but you just can't think about it. So, I made a call. I said I'd like to come back, and they set everything up. They pay for everything. I'm in Thailand. They pay for a ticket back from Thailand. And this time there was a different captain he was a bit of an asshole, and I didn't really like him. And I don't think he liked me very much either. I don't know. But for some reason, we were stuck. We couldn't work with the crab, so we were stuck on land for a week. And he was making us do all kinds of mundane tasks, scrub this, scrub that, and it just sucked. So, after a little while, we got to go out and we got to go salmon fishing. And we started catching a lot of salmon. And, after a couple of weeks, they started giving us salmon dinner. So all the guys would get together and they would cook up some salmon. Oh, yeah, this is great. Well, after about the third or fourth dinner, it was kind of like, I had enough of this, man. And it was just getting to be a little bit too much. But we were spending more time on land than we were out on the ocean. And I didn't like that. I like being out on the ocean, and I didn't like that very much. But, what are you going to do? But while I was on land, I saw bears rummaging through the garbage. And, I made sure to keep away from them. When you were walking down around like this frozen pond. And then up on the top of the hill was where the garbage was, and they were all there. There, it might be 4 or 5 bears up there. I saw some bald eagles. I saw some seals. I mean, you're on the boat, and you look down, boom, there's a seal looking up at you. It was kind of cool. But most of the time, the work was either really, really hard, and you were working like 15, 18-hour shifts, or the work was just boring, and it just sucked. And, eventually we got towards the end of the tour, and our old captain came back, and things seemed to be a bit better. Now, while I was on the boat, I was trying to put together a tour to Thailand, to get guys to go to Thailand. But the problem was that most guys on boats, they don't hold on to their money, okay? They piss it all away. They get drunk. They spend it on blow. They buy some weed. They buy some coke. They go out and drink. They get some hooker. Next thing you know, they're down to next to nothing. And they're like, okay, when's my next tour start? But I knew this kid. He was a Native American kid from North Dakota. And for some reason, I got him interested in Thai gold. I think I had some and I showed it to him. But it wasn't that much. It was like 1 or 2 baht of gold. And so I started telling him, I can get you this much gold and all this and that. And he's like, oh, really? Really? I said, yeah. I said, don't worry, man. It's all legit, And I wasn't going to rip him off, I charged enough money to where I was going to make like $700-800 off of the gold. He was going to pay like $3,000, and I was going to make some money. I thought that was fair, And so the day came. We got our checks. He cashed the check, gave me the money, and I'm like, all right, we're in. I'm on the boat, waiting to get out of there, and the captain calls me in. The captain had to call everybody in to give them their review and to talk to them and all that kind of stuff. He says to me, I'd view it as a personal favor if you gave his money back to him. And I was like, huh? What are you talking about? I was like, he's a grown man. I'm like, what? He knows what's going on. And he goes, come on. He goes, this guy's like a little kid, man. He goes, you can't take his money from him. And I just went, you know what? I don't want to get on the bad side of the captain. I don't want to rub anybody the wrong way. And I thought, it's nice to make the money, but you know what? I'll do the right thing. So I gave the guy his money back, okay? And then the captain called me in, and a little while later, and he called me in for my review, and he said to me, everything is fine, Scott. All right, I wrote this down because I remember it word for word. Everything is fine. You work hard, and that's all we ask. You can come back if you want. You'll always have a job here on this boat. Eventually, I think that boat caught on fire, and now it's no longer in service. But he said, I have to ask you, why are you here? Do you see the people that are on this boat? They're all from Montana, North Dakota, places like this, Idaho. He goes, they don't have that many options. And I've watched you. And I know you're pretty sharp. But I thought to myself, okay, what's he trying to tell me here? And he said, is there anything else you can do besides work on this boat? He goes, really? I'm just asking you. You're never going to be the captain or anything like that. So can you do anything else? And I said, yeah, probably. And he goes, well, you might want to think about doing that because I don't know that you can do this all your life and be happy. And, I don't know that it's going to work. So the next day I went to the airport. I spent the night in a hotel. The next day I went to the airport and flew to Bangkok. And I thought, as soon as I get there, I'm going to finish up the website and make a go of it. And that is the end of part 2. Part 3 is basically just when I got here, when I came back here, how did I start making money again? How did I get into it? And how did I ended up staying here? Because at that point it had been a few years. I don't know. I'd have to think about it. But yeah, so that's part 3. All right, stay tuned. I'll talk to you later. I'm Scott. I'm an American in Bangkok. Until next time, choke D, leo jerk and my. That is good luck and see you again.